The moment I pulled that hidden compartment open, my world began to unravel. There was a distinct thrill I always got when I finally found something I'd been searching for. But this time it was accompanied by a sense of dread. I'd been looking for an old warranty receipt. A trivial thing, really. Something I knew would be buried somewhere in the back of our cluttered storage closet. But what I found instead was a small, dark alcove I'd never noticed before, concealed behind an old wooden shelf. Curiosity turned my fingers into intruders, prying open a box that should have stayed closed. I wish I'd left it there, buried under layers of dust and the memories of a life I thought I knew. The first thing I saw were the photos, dozens of them. My eyes widened as I pulled out one after another. Each photograph was more damning than the last. There was Elizabeth, my wife of over 20 years, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Her eyes glowed with a light that I hadn't been able to ignite for years. And the reason for that was clear. A tall, athletic-looking guy stood beside her in every single picture. At first, I thought maybe it was just some old friend she hadn't told me about. Someone she'd run into and decided to catch up with. But then I noticed their hands, intertwined as they strolled down a beach. I saw them with their arms wrapped around each other in front of picturesque European backdrops. Paris, Rome, Santorini, places Elizabeth had gone on her solo vacations to find herself. My pulse pounded like a war drum in my ears as I scanned through each photograph. There were at least 30 pictures, documenting moments and locations spanning God knows how many years. My head spun as the weight of what I was seeing settled in. And then I reached the last few. They were in our backyard. The white fence I'd spent weeks building as a surprise for Elizabeth loomed in the background, a mocking testament to my cluelessness. She was dressed in the same floral sundress she'd worn on a weekend just a few months ago. The date stamped on the back of the photo was recent, only 3 months ago. That was the final nail in the coffin. My breath hitched and I felt like I'd been punched square in the gut. All those times she had assured me that she just needed space, that she was going alone to rediscover herself. All lies, and I'd bought every single one. Numbness washed over me, making my hands clumsy and my thoughts scatter like shattered glass. How long had she been playing me for a fool? And why? Why was this happening to me? But even as I stood there, clutching the damning evidence, a small voice in the back of my mind told me to wait, to not jump to conclusions. Maybe it was just some misunderstanding. Maybe I was overreacting. Bullshit. I knew better. I wasn't an idiot, or at least I didn't think I was until now. My wife had been cheating on me. Elizabeth, the woman I'd dedicated my life to, the woman I trusted more than anyone in the world, had been sneaking around with some younger guy. Anger flared up inside me, but it was quickly doused by a suffocating sadness. Was I not good enough for her anymore? Was I just old news? Had I turned into the man she barely noticed when she walked into the room? I forced myself to put the photographs back into the box, shoving it back into the hidden compartment like a dirty secret. But I knew I couldn't just leave it there. I had to confront her, had to hear her say it, had to look her in the eyes as she explained every damn lie she'd fed me over the years. With trembling hands, I shut the door to the storage room, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my chest. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Every breath tasted like betrayal. I made my way to the kitchen, the house feeling cold and foreign. Everything looked the same, yet different. The counter where we'd shared late-night talks, the couch where we'd snuggled during winter evenings, all of it was tainted now, painted with a layer of deceit. My phone buzzed in my pocket, yanking me out of my daze. It was Elizabeth, her name lighting up the screen like a warning. I swiped it open, dreading what she might say. "Hey, honey, I'm gonna be a little late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. Okay? Got a meeting that ran over. Love you." Her voice was cheerful, sweet, and completely fake. My blood boiled, and I had to clench my teeth to keep from shouting right then and there. "Sure," I croaked, my voice betraying none of the fury boiling beneath the surface. "Take your time." I hung up before she could respond and stared at the phone in my hand, wondering how long she'd been lying to me with that same sickeningly sweet tone. I paced around the kitchen, back and forth, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, the images from those photos flashed behind my eyelids like some twisted slideshow. Elizabeth's carefree smile, her hand resting on that guy's shoulder. I clenched my fists so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "What are you going to do, John?" I muttered to myself, staring blankly at the fridge. The question echoed in the empty room, the silence a sharp contrast to the storm brewing inside me. A part of me wanted to confront her the moment she walked through that door, to shove the photos in her face and watch her squirm. But another part, a darker, more vengeful part, wanted to wait and play it cool, see what other lies she would spin, see just how far she'd go to defend her disgusting little secret. Time dragged like a lead weight tied around my neck, choking me with every second that ticked by. I replayed every conversation we'd had in the past few months, dissecting her words, her expressions, every damn smile and laugh. Had they all been fake? How had I missed it? The sound of the front door creaking open jarred me from my thoughts. I could hear her humming a tune as she kicked off her shoes and set her purse on the table by the hallway. The sound of her voice, so familiar and yet so utterly alien now, grated on my nerves. "John, you home?" she called out. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat and forced myself to step out of the kitchen. She was standing in the hallway, her coat draped over one arm, phone in the other. Her face lit up when she saw me, the same fake smile plastered across her lips. I could see the faintest smudge of red lipstick on her collar, the color she knew I hated. "Hey, honey," she chirped, striding over to me. "How was your day?" I stared at her, my jaw clenched tight. She leaned in to give me a quick peck on the cheek, but I jerked back, letting her lips brush against empty air. Elizabeth frowned, pulling away slightly, a look of feigned concern on her face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, almost worried, almost. The irritation beneath her eyes gave her away. "Where were you?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, slicing through the casual facade she'd built around herself. Her brows knitted together, confusion or perhaps surprise flashing across her face. "I told you, at work. Had a late meeting, remember?" She gestured to her phone as if that was some sort of proof. "Really?" I crossed my arms over my chest, the pictures in the hidden compartment burning a hole in my mind. "Because I found something today that says otherwise." Her expression shifted ever so slightly. She tilted her head, lips pressing into a thin line. "What do you mean? What did you find?" "Stop lying, Elizabeth," I snapped. "Stop with the games. I know what you've been doing." The words hung in the air like poison, the weight of them almost tangible. For a split second, I saw it, a flicker of panic in her eyes. But just as quickly, she masked it with a look of offended indignation. "I don't know what you're talking about, John," she said, her voice rising defensively. "What? Did you suddenly decide to go through my things? Is that what this is about?" My blood boiled at her audacity. Even caught red-handed, she had the nerve to play the victim, to turn this on me. "Don't you dare," I growled. "I found your little stash of photos, the ones of you and that guy. You want to keep pretending? Go on, try. But I have proof." Her face drained of color, and for a moment, I thought I'd broken through. I thought I'd finally shattered that fake little mask she wore so well. But then she scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was some irrational child throwing a tantrum. "Oh, those?" she sneered. "Really, John? You think a few pictures mean anything?" She laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "You've got to be kidding me. Who the hell is he, Elizabeth?" I demanded, stepping closer, the anger bubbling dangerously close to the surface. "How long has this been going on?" "Who he is doesn't matter," she shot back, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's not what you think. But honestly, why do you even care? You're always so damn busy with your own stuff. It's like you've barely noticed me for years." The words were like a slap to the face. "Is that your excuse?" I spat. "Because I was working to keep this family going. You decided to screw around with some guy behind my back?" Elizabeth shrugged, tossing her coat onto the nearest chair. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, you'd have known. But you didn't. So what if I wanted a little fun on the side? It's not like you've been much of a husband lately. I could barely breathe. My vision blurred at the edges as the fury coursed through me. You really think this is about fun? I shouted. You destroyed everything, Elizabeth. For what? Some thrill? Is this all a joke to you? She stared at me, eyes cold and unfeeling. Honestly, John, grow up. You act like I'm the first woman to ever cheat. Get over it. Maybe if you hadn't turned into such a boring old man, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The room spun. I wanted to scream, to throw something, no, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. She wanted me to lose it, to turn this into something where she could paint herself as the victim. But I wouldn't let her. Instead, I turned on my heel and walked away, her mocking laughter trailing after me like a ghost that would never leave me alone. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that I felt the vibration through the soles of my feet. The sound reverberated through the quiet night, and for a moment, the silence that followed was almost comforting. The cold evening air hit my face like a splash of ice water, clearing my thoughts just enough to keep me from completely losing my mind. How could she be so damn casual about it? As if everything I just found meant absolutely nothing? I replayed the confrontation over and over, her dismissive tone, the way she had shrugged off my accusations like they were minor inconveniences. Every fiber of my being was screaming to go back in there, to tear those lies out of her one by one until she had nothing left to hide. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over the contacts list. Should I call someone? Tell someone? But who? It felt so humiliating. Letting anyone know what a fool I'd been. My pride was shredded into a million pieces, and I didn't even know where to start picking them up. I ended up scrolling through the photos I had taken of the evidence before putting them back in the storage closet. Each image burned my eyes, but I couldn't look away. She was so happy in them. Elizabeth looked more alive than she had in years, like a woman I hadn't seen in a long, long time. It was almost as if she'd reserved all her joy and affection for him, leaving me with the dregs of a relationship that was already falling apart. I spotted a detail I hadn't noticed before. A distinct hotel logo on the glass she was holding in one of the pictures. I zoomed in, heart hammering in my chest as I tried to make out the words. Regency Springs Hotel. That place was a 3-hour drive from here. She told me she was visiting her sister that weekend. So that was another lie. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the damn hotel. My hands were shaking as I waited for the receptionist to answer, but I forced myself to stay calm, to sound natural. Regency Springs Hotel. How may I assist you? Hi, I croaked, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm looking to confirm a reservation. It's under the name Elizabeth Turner. The receptionist paused, the sound of clicking keys echoing faintly through the line. One moment, sir. Yes, Elizabeth Turner. She stayed with us for 4 nights last month. Is there a specific inquiry you have about her stay? My blood went cold. For nights? She told me she'd only be gone for the weekend. That means she had spent at least 2 extra days there without me knowing. Yes, can you tell me if she was alone? I hated myself for asking. Hated how desperate and pathetic I sounded. The receptionist hesitated. I'm sorry, sir, but we cannot disclose guest details for privacy reasons. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. It's really important. I'm her husband, and I just need to know if she was alone or not. Please. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the receptionist weighing her options. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't share that information. The call ended with a click, leaving me standing in the driveway, staring at my phone as if it were a grenade that had just gone off. The frustration bubbled up again, hot and thick in my throat. She'd spent 4 nights there. God knows what she was doing, or who she was doing it with. I kicked the front tire of my car, the pain shooting up my leg like a jolt of electricity. What now? I couldn't just keep playing detective. But I also couldn't go back in there and pretend everything was fine. Pretend she hadn't just dismantled my world with a few dismissive sentences. No, I needed more answers. Answers she clearly wasn't willing to give. Grabbing my keys, I jumped into the car and drove back into town, the streetlights flashing by in a blur. My head was a mess, my thoughts crashing into each other like a violent storm. I ended up at the parking lot of the dingy little bar on 5th Street, the one I used to visit when Elizabeth and I were just dating. When everything was simple, before life got complicated and she decided I wasn't enough for her anymore. I pushed through the door, the smell of alcohol and stale peanuts hitting me like a wall. There were a few regulars scattered around, their eyes glued to the TV screen mounted above the bar. I took a seat, motioning for the bartender. "Whiskey. Neat," I muttered. He nodded, sliding a glass in front of me a few moments later. I didn't bother savoring it, just knocked it back in one gulp, relishing the burn as it traveled down my throat. "She cheating on you or something?" The voice came from my left. An old guy, probably in his late 60s, was nursing his own glass, eyeing me with a kind of resigned sympathy. "You've got that look, the one all us poor bastards get when we find out." I stared at him, the urge to tell him to mind his own business warring with the sudden need to vent. "Yeah," I said bitterly, surprising myself with how quickly the words came out. "Something like that." He nodded knowingly, as if he'd seen it all before. "You know what they say, once a bitch, always a bitch. My ex, hell, she did the same to me. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter how much you try to make sense of it. Some people are just wired that way. They'll twist the truth, make you doubt yourself, and leave you picking up the pieces." I let his words sink in, staring at my empty glass. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was no rhyme or reason to any of this. Maybe Elizabeth was just one of those people, a natural-born liar who'd turned me into her personal fool. But that still didn't answer my burning question. Why? Why had she done this to us? To me? I slammed the glass down on the counter, pushing myself off the barstool with a sense of grim determination. Enough was enough. If she wouldn't give me the truth willingly, then I'd damn well take it. I drove back home, the wheels of my car eating up the distance in record time. Anger and betrayal coursed through my veins like fire, but beneath it all, a dark sense of clarity settled in. I was done playing the role of the clueless husband. If Elizabeth wanted to twist the knife, she was about to find out what happens when it cuts both ways. The house was quiet when I returned, bathed in the soft glow of the living room lamp. Elizabeth was sprawled on the couch, her legs tucked underneath her like she hadn't a care in the world. She looked up as I stepped inside, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe even a hint of concern. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same cold, detached gaze. "Back so soon?" she asked nonchalantly, like we hadn't just had the confrontation of our lives less than an hour ago. I ignored the venom laced in her voice and marched straight to the storage closet. The sound of her scoffing behind me only fueled my determination. I yanked the hidden compartment open, pulling out the box of incriminating photos. Elizabeth's eyes widened slightly when she saw it, but then she shrugged, as if daring me to make a big deal out of it again. I slammed the box down on the coffee table in front of her, the contents spilling out haphazardly. "Explain these," I demanded, pointing at the pictures, my voice trembling with barely restrained fury. She stared at the photographs, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret, or was it just irritation, cross her face. But then she snorted, shaking her head as if I were some pathetic creature barking up the wrong tree. "John, we've been through this already. They're just pictures," she said dismissively, flipping one over with her finger. "And what are you going to do, huh? Throw a tantrum because I spent some time with someone else?" "Spent time?" I echoed, incredulous. "This isn't just spending time, Elizabeth. You lied to me about everything. You told me you were alone on those trips, that you needed space, and the whole time you were with him. Why? What the hell was I doing so wrong that you needed to sneak around like this?" Elizabeth rolled her eyes. "I needed a break from you, John. From this suffocating marriage. I needed someone who actually listened. Someone who made me feel alive again." Alive? The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "So what? I'm just a ghost to you now? Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, leaning back against the couch, her arms crossed over her chest. You knew things were bad between us. Don't act surprised. I didn't know this, I shouted, my voice cracking. I didn't know you were sneaking off to hotels and God knows where else with some guy half our age. I thought we were just struggling, not broken. Elizabeth shrugged again, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Well, now you know. We were broken a long time ago, John. You just refused to see it. Who is he? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. What's his name? She arched an eyebrow at me, a smug smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Why? So you can go hunt him down? Beat your chest and claim some pathetic victory? It doesn't matter who he is. He's not the problem here, we are. No, you are. I shot back. You made the choice to lie. You made the choice to cheat. And you don't even have the decency to feel bad about it. Elizabeth sighed, as if the whole thing was a tedious inconvenience she couldn't wait to be done with. You want to know who he is so badly? Fine. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing to slits. His name is Matt. He's in his early 30s, single, successful, and, surprise, surprise, he actually gives a damn about me. The casual way she said it, like she was listing off items on a grocery list, made something snap inside me. I wanted to lash out, to make her hurt the way she was hurting me. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice steady even as my heart raced. How long? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Elizabeth looked thoughtful for a moment, like she was calculating something in her head. Almost 2 years, give or take, she replied flippantly. My stomach dropped. 2 years. 2 years of lies, of deceit, of her looking me in the eye every day and pretending like nothing was wrong. I couldn't hold back the rage any longer. 2 years. I roared. You've been screwing around with him for 2 years, and you didn't think that was something I should know? Honestly, John, stop acting like a child, she said coldly, standing up and facing me. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Well, I don't. I'm happier now than I've been in a long time. And if you had paid any attention to me, you'd have seen it coming. I stepped back, shaking my head in disbelief. You're unbelievable, Elizabeth. You really are. You destroy our marriage, and you have the audacity to blame me for it. You destroyed it first, she spat, her voice like ice. With your neglect, your constant absences. Do you think I wanted to find someone else? No, but you pushed me to it. Pushed you? I echoed, my voice trembling. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. You made this mess. You're the one who stepped out on us. And I'd do it again, she hissed, eyes blazing. Because at least with him, I felt alive. With you, it's like I'm suffocating. You've turned into this sad, predictable man who's too blind to see what's right in front of him. The words cut deeper than any knife could. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd built my life around, and felt nothing but emptiness. This wasn't Elizabeth. This wasn't the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman standing in front of me was a stranger, cold and calculating. Someone who had carefully crafted her lies and wore them like armor. Get out, I whispered, my voice hoarse. Elizabeth blinked, her eyebrows shooting up in surprise. Excuse me? You heard me? I said louder this time. Get. If you're so happy with him, then go be with him. But get the hell out of my house. Now. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Panic, perhaps. Or maybe she just hadn't expected me to actually kick her out. But then her lips curled into a smug smile. Fine, she said, grabbing her purse. You want me gone? I'll go. But don't think for a second that this is over, John. You're not getting rid of me that easily. She turned on her heel and strode out the door, her head held high, like she'd won some twisted game I didn't even know we were playing. The door clicked shut behind her, and I was left standing alone in the empty house, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad, or betrayed, or even hurt. I just felt nothing. The silence swallowed me whole after she left. I stood there, numb and immobile, staring at the door she had just slammed shut behind her. It felt like a vacuum had sucked every ounce of energy and emotion out of the room, leaving behind only emptiness. The adrenaline that had been fueling me moments ago drained away, and I collapsed onto the couch, burying my head in my hands. 2 years. 2 whole damn years she'd been playing me for a fool. It felt unreal, like I'd woken up in some twisted parallel reality where everything I thought I knew was a lie. But the anger slowly crept back in. The more I thought about it, the more it festered, bubbling beneath the surface, waiting for an outlet. She'd walked out like she owned the place, like she was the wronged party. She'd twisted every truth, turned every accusation around, and somehow made it my fault. I needed more answers, needed to understand how deep this rabbit hole went. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed Elizabeth's laptop. She was reckless, or maybe she was just too confident to care. Either way, her laptop didn't have a password on it. I knew I should have felt guilty, invading her privacy like this, but then I reminded myself that she'd already done worse, so much worse. I started with her emails. My fingers moved rapidly across the keys, eyes scanning line after line of mundane correspondence with friends, family, and colleagues. But then I found a folder hidden at the bottom, one simply labeled receipts. I clicked it open, and my stomach twisted at what I saw. There were booking confirmations from hotels I'd never heard of, all in places she'd never mentioned. Napa Valley, Key West, even a quaint little bed and breakfast upstate. The dates matched her so-called solo trips perfectly. She'd planned everything so meticulously, kept me out of the loop so skillfully, that I hadn't even suspected a thing. And then there were the emails to Matt. I clenched my teeth as I opened the first one. Hey handsome, can't wait to see you again next weekend. I've booked the same room at the Regency. Remember how wild things got last time? Winking face, kisses, My vision blurred, rage crashing over me like a tidal wave. Every muscle in my body tensed as I read message after message, each one worse than the last. There were casual notes about mundane things, what she'd had for breakfast, which outfits she thought he'd like, and then there were the details, personal, intimate confessions that I'd once thought were reserved for us alone. My mind raced back to all the times she'd kissed me goodbye before leaving on these trips. The words she'd whispered in my ear, sweet reassurances that she just needed some time to recharge. All lies. The whole damn thing had been a facade, a well-crafted charade that I'd been stupid enough to believe. I kept scrolling, eyes burning, until I reached the last email in the chain. It was sent only 2 days ago. Matt, I told him. I told John everything, or at least enough to keep him off our backs. Don't worry, he's harmless. The worst he'll do is sulk around the house like a wounded puppy. It's time to make a decision, though. I'm tired of living this double life. Let's just do it. I'll move in with you, and we can finally have a real life together. Love, V. I read the words over and over, feeling like I'd been gutted. She told him everything? That was the story she'd fed Matt. That she'd already spilled the truth? And she'd had the nerve to stand in front of me tonight and continue to lie to my face. Worse, she'd made me look like some sad, pathetic excuse of a man who'd never take action. Harmless, she'd called me. I could feel the words searing into my skin, burning me from the inside out. I leaned back in the chair, chest heaving. So this was it, then. She was ready to throw away everything we'd built together without even a backward glance. She was done pretending, done humoring me. The worst part was, she was right. I hadn't done anything drastic. I hadn't thrown her out, hadn't packed her bags, hadn't even raised my voice the way I'd wanted to. But that was about to change. I stared at her screen for a long time, my mind racing. If she wanted a fight, then she'd get one. I navigated to her social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, everything, and scrolled through her posts. Most were carefully curated to project an image of happiness, like she was some blissful wife living the dream. But there were hidden messages there, too. Cryptic comments from friends I didn't recognize, tags that didn't make sense. It all pointed back to Matt. My heart pounded as I dug deeper. Her recent friends list, the people she'd been interacting with. I finally found him. Matt Richards. His profile picture was of some flashy car parked by the beach. Typical. I clicked on his page, feeling the resentment build with every click. His photos were filled with travel, exotic destinations, expensive hotels, high-end restaurants. And there, in several of them, barely visible in the background or reflected in mirrors, was Elizabeth. I recognized the dress she'd worn in one of our date nights. The bracelet I'd given her for our last anniversary sparkled on her wrist in another picture. He'd carefully cropped her out of most of them, but I could see her, like a ghost haunting his memories. "You arrogant bastard," I thought bitterly. "You thought you were so clever, hiding her in plain sight. But the worst part was it worked. I'd missed it. I'd missed all of it. I took screenshots of everything, every post, every picture, every comment that linked him to her. I needed ammunition, needed proof for what I was about to do. And then, with a grim sense of satisfaction, I closed her laptop and set it aside. I had everything I needed now. All the cards were in my hand. But there was one thing left to do. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. It rang a few times before she picked up, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Hello, Elizabeth," I said, voice steady, calm. "We're not done talking." She laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Oh, I think we are. I'm already halfway to Matt's, and I'm not turning around. Then I guess I'll see you both tomorrow. You can tell him everything. Because I'll be there, too." There was a pause, and I could hear the gears turning in her mind. "John, what are you talking about?" "You said I'm harmless," I replied softly. "I think it's time I proved you wrong." I hung up before she could respond, a dark satisfaction curling in my chest. She wanted to play games? Well, I just upped the stakes. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, visions of Elizabeth and Matt swirled in my head like some horrific montage. I saw them together in those hotel rooms, whispering sweet nothings and making plans for a future without me. Each image was more vivid than the last, and each one cut deeper than the one before. I knew confronting them would be ugly, messy, but I was ready for it. The next morning, I dressed in silence, my movements slow and deliberate. The house felt different, emptier, colder. Every corner held a memory, a piece of our shared life that she had defiled with her deceit. I looked around, realizing I had been living in a museum of lies for the past 2 years. But today I would burn it all to the ground. I got into the car and drove. My destination? Matt's place, or more accurately, the upscale apartment he rented downtown. It wasn't hard to find. Elizabeth had mentioned it in one of her emails, bragging about the view from his balcony and the private pool she'd loved to swim in. I'd memorized the address last night, letting it sear into my brain like a brand. I pulled up in front of the building, a towering structure of steel and glass, and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, and my pulse raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to keep my composure if I was going to pull this off. I walked into the lobby, my jaw clenched. The doorman eyed me with polite suspicion, but I plastered on a fake smile and nodded curtly. "Morning," I muttered, striding past him like I belonged there. "I'm just here to see Matt Richards. He's expecting me." "Name?" the doorman asked, his fingers hovering over the intercom. "John Turner," I replied smoothly. It wasn't a lie. He might not be expecting me, but Elizabeth sure as hell was, and I intended to make good on my promise. The doorman pressed a button, his voice low as he murmured into the intercom. There was a pause, then a crackling reply. I couldn't hear what was said, but the doorman nodded and gestured toward the elevators. "Penthouse suite, top floor," he said, his expression unreadable. "Thanks," I muttered, barely registering his words as I stepped into the elevator. The ride up felt like an eternity. I watched the numbers light up, one by one, until finally, the doors slid open with a soft ding. I stepped out into a spacious, tastefully decorated foyer. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the only door on the floor. I hesitated for a split second, then raised my hand and knocked, hard and fast, before I could change my mind. There was a shuffling sound inside, then the door swung open, and there he was, Matt Richards, tall, fit, with that effortlessly handsome look that made women's heads turn. He had the kind of casual confidence that seemed to ooze from every pore. I hated him on sight. "Can I help you?" he asked, his brow furrowing as he took in my appearance. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. "You sure can," I said evenly, my voice steady. "We need to talk. About Elizabeth." His face went blank for a moment, then a slow, smug smile spread across his lips. "Ah, you must be John. She said you might show up." I clenched my fists at my sides, struggling to keep my temper in check. "Did she now?" "Yeah," he said, leaning casually against the doorframe like he didn't have a care in the world. "She said you'd probably come here all worked up, looking for answers. But, honestly, man, what are you hoping to achieve?" I took a step closer, my jaw tight. "I want the truth, for starters. I want to know how long you've been sleeping with my wife. And I want to know what the hell you're planning on doing about it now that she's run off to be with you." Matt's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew wider. "John, buddy, I'm not here to play games with you. What Elizabeth and I have, it's not just some fling. She's done with you, man. She's moving on." I couldn't believe the sheer arrogance of this guy. He spoke as if he were doing me a favor, like I should be grateful he was taking Elizabeth off my hands. "She's done with me?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Funny, because last night, she didn't seem so sure. She was still trying to spin her little web of lies, still trying to make herself look like the victim. "Because she is the victim," Matt retorted, his tone dripping with disdain. "She's been miserable with you for years, John. You suffocated her, kept her trapped in some boring, lifeless marriage while you did whatever you wanted. And when she finally found someone who actually cared about her, someone who listened, you couldn't handle it." I shook my head, incredulous. "You've got a real talent for twisting the truth, don't you?" "It's not twisting the truth, it's seeing reality," he shot back. "You're just pissed because you got left behind. Face it, John, you're old news. She's moved on, and so should you." His words were like gasoline on a fire. I stepped forward, invading his space, and watched as his confident smile faltered for the first time. "Old news," I whispered, my voice dangerously low. "You think this is some kind of joke? That you can just waltz in and tear apart a 20-year marriage without consequences?" Matt raised his hands defensively, but there was still that infuriating smirk on his face. "Look, I didn't come looking for trouble. Elizabeth made her choice. You need to respect that." "Respect?" I spat, fury boiling over. "You have the nerve to stand there and talk about respect? You've been screwing my wife behind my back for 2 years. You lied to her, used her, and now you want to act like the good guy." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off, taking another step forward until we were practically nose to nose. "Well, guess what?" I growled. "You're not the good guy. You're not her savior. You're just some spineless coward who thought he could steal another man's life and get away with it." Matt's face hardened, his jaw clenching. "And what are you going to do about it, huh? You think you're going to scare me off?" "No," I said softly, a grim smile tugging at my lips. "But I'm going to make damn sure that by the time I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never met her." Before he could respond, a voice interrupted us from inside the apartment. "John, stop this." I turned slowly, and there she was, Elizabeth, standing in the hallway with a look of shock and irritation on her face. Her hair was tousled, her cheeks flushed, and she wore nothing but a flimsy robe. "Of course," I muttered under my breath. "Why am I not surprised?" Elizabeth took a step forward, her eyes blazing with fury. "I told you, John. I told you to stay out of this. Why can't you just let it go?" "Because you haven't told me the truth yet," I said, my voice deadly calm. "You haven't told me why you felt the need to destroy everything we had, why you lied over and over again. So here I am, Elizabeth. I'm waiting." Her lips tightened, and she glanced at Matt, who looked distinctly uncomfortable now. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off with a sharp glare. "You want the truth?" she said, crossing her arms over her chest. Fine. The truth is, I was never happy with you. The truth is, Matt made me realize how empty my life with you was. And the truth is, I don't care what happens to you anymore, John. You're nothing to me. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. But I stood my ground, refusing to let her see how much it hurt. Then why are you still standing here, Elizabeth? I asked softly. Why haven't you packed your bags and left? Because I was trying to make it easier on you, she spat. But clearly you're too stubborn to take the hint. I took a deep breath, feeling the last threads of my restraint unraveling. You want to leave? Then leave. But don't think for a second that you're walking away from this scot-free. She frowned, confusion flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? I held up my phone, showing her the screen. I have every email, every text, every photo. You're not going to just walk out of here and pretend none of this happened. Her face paled. You wouldn't. Try me. I interrupted, my voice ice cold. You've taken everything from me, Elizabeth. But I'm not going to let you walk away without facing the consequences. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, she let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. You really are pathetic, she whispered. Do whatever you want, John. Destroy everything. I don't care anymore. With that, she turned on her heel and walked back into the apartment, slamming the door behind her. And just like that, I was left standing alone, staring at the closed door, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost settle like a stone in my chest. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stood there, staring at that closed door for what felt like an eternity. My heart thudded in my chest like a drumbeat of rage, drowning out every other thought. Elizabeth thought she could walk away, just like that she could leave me in the dust, humiliated, while she waltzed into her new life with Matt like nothing ever happened. Not a chance. If she wanted to burn everything down, then I'd bring the damn gasoline. I turned on my heel and left the building, my mind buzzing with a dangerous clarity. There was no going back now. She'd made her choice. Now it was time for her to face the fallout. I drove back home with a singular focus. Once inside, I went straight to our office. No, my office now, and sat down at the desk. I opened my laptop, logged in, and pulled up everything I had gathered over the past few days. The photos, the emails, the messages, all of it was meticulously saved and organized. There was no room for error here. I had a plan, a vindictive, vengeful plan. And the first step was to show Elizabeth what true destruction looked like. I composed a new email, attaching every single incriminating piece of evidence. My hands didn't even shake as I typed out the addresses in the to field. Our friends, her family, her colleagues, anyone who mattered in her life, anyone who thought she was still the sweet, loving Elizabeth they knew. I pasted in the photos, wrote a brief but damning message about what she'd been doing behind my back for the past 2 years, and hit send. There. It was done. In a few minutes, her carefully crafted image would shatter. Every secret she'd been hiding, every lie she'd told, would come crashing down around her like a house of cards. I sat back, exhaling slowly, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction unfurl in my chest. But I wasn't done yet. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Steve Harper was a no-nonsense guy I'd gone to college with. We weren't exactly close friends, but I knew he was ruthless when it came to handling divorces. And that's exactly what I needed right now. Someone who wouldn't flinch at playing dirty. John, Steve answered on the second ring, his voice curious. Haven't heard from you in a while. What's up? I need you to start drafting divorce papers, I said flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. And I want to hit her with everything we've got. There was a pause on the other end, and I could practically hear him raising his eyebrows. Elizabeth? Wow, what happened? She's been cheating on me for the past 2 years, I replied, the words rolling off my tongue like poison. I have proof. Emails, photos, everything. Steve let out a low whistle. Damn. I'm sorry to hear that, John. But if you've got that kind of evidence, we can definitely make sure she doesn't walk away with much. What's your goal here? Just a clean break? Or do you want to go for full custody of any shared assets? Clean break, I echoed, laughing bitterly. No, I want her to pay. I want to make sure she has nothing left when this is over. Not a penny, not a shred of dignity. There was another pause, longer this time. I hear you, John, but just remember, the legal system doesn't always reward vengeance. You need to be smart about this. I don't care about smart, I snapped. I care about making her regret every lie she told me. Steve sighed, but I knew he understood. All right, I'll get started on the paperwork. But, John, just think about what happens next. Don't let her drag you down to her level. I hung up without replying. It wasn't about being dragged down. It was about showing Elizabeth that actions have consequences. Real, painful consequences. As I was about to close my laptop, a thought struck me. Something Matt had said kept replaying in my head. She's moving on. You should too. The arrogance of it. The way he'd spoken to me as if I were some washed-up loser who couldn't handle reality. It made my blood boil all over again. So I did what any man in my position would do. I looked up Matt's company. He worked for a high-profile real estate firm, one that prided itself on having a squeaky clean image. I found his boss's contact information and started drafting another email. I kept it short and to the point, attaching the photos of Matt and Elizabeth together. Subject: Employee misconduct and infidelity ***. To whom it may concern, it has come to my attention that one of your senior agents, Matt Richards, has been involved in an affair with my wife for the past 2 years. I have included photographic proof of their relationship, taken during what I assume were work trips. I thought you should be aware of the character of the people representing your company. Best, John Turner. I stared at the message for a few moments, letting the reality of what I was doing sink in. Then I hit send. Let him deal with the fallout now. Let him try to explain to his boss how his personal life had become a public scandal. And if they decided he was too much of a liability, well, good riddance. I sat back, feeling the first twinge of something that resembled satisfaction. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by a gnawing emptiness. I had done what I set out to do. I had unleashed hell on Elizabeth's life, and Matt's too. So why didn't I feel any better? The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. Because I wasn't getting her back. No matter how much I destroyed, how many bridges I burned, I couldn't undo what she'd done. The marriage we'd had was dead, buried, and no amount of revenge would bring it back. But that didn't mean I was done. I glanced at my phone, a new idea forming in my mind. If Elizabeth wanted to play dirty, then she should have known I'd go all in. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number of one of her closest friends. Lisa. She'd always been on my side, always encouraged Elizabeth to fix things between us. She would be the perfect person to spread the word. I hit call and Lisa picked up almost immediately. John? She asked, her voice cautious. Is everything okay? No, Lisa. Everything is far from okay, I said grimly. I need to tell you something, and it's going to change the way you see Elizabeth forever. She gasped softly. John. What are you talking about? Just listen, I said, my voice hardening. I have proof that she's been cheating on me, and I want to make sure everyone knows the truth. What? Lisa's voice was incredulous, a mix of shock and disbelief. Elizabeth? Cheating? That can't be true. It is, I snapped, and I'm sending you everything right now. Pictures, emails, the whole 9 yards. You deserve to know who your friend really is. And I want you to share it, Lisa. Tell everyone. Let them see the real Elizabeth. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, finally, Lisa spoke, her voice low and strained. Send it to me, John. If it's true, then people need to know. I hung up and forwarded her the evidence without hesitation. One more person who would see through Elizabeth's lies. One more piece of the puzzle falling into place. The weight in my chest lifted slightly, but the emptiness remained. I glanced around the room, the silence pressing in on me like a living thing. Revenge had a bitter aftertaste. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing left to do. Something that would ensure she'd never forget what she'd done. Something she'd regret for the rest of her life. And as I reached for my phone again, I knew exactly who I needed to call to make it happen. The wheels in my mind spun like a well-oiled machine. The revenge I had enacted so far was satisfying in its own way, but it wasn't enough. Elizabeth thought she could walk all over me, make me look like a fool, and move on without so much as a scratch. It was time to show her what true retribution looked like. Time to strike at the core of everything she valued. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin, Paul. Paul wasn't your average guy. He worked in private investigations, and he'd seen every kind of mess a person could imagine. If there was anyone who could turn Elizabeth's life inside out, it was him. John. Paul's voice was deep and gruff when he answered. Long time no talk. What's going on? Paul, I need your help, I said, not bothering with small talk. I've got a situation that's complicated, and I need it handled quietly. Complicated? He chuckled, the sound rough around the edges. You mean like legal complicated? Or the kind where I should tell you to get a good lawyer? Neither, I replied. This is personal. My wife. She's been cheating on me for the past 2 years. I've already started dealing with it, but I need more. I want to know everything about the guy she's with. Every skeleton in his closet. Every secret he's tried to bury. I want to make sure he has nothing left by the time I'm done. Paul went silent on the other end of the line, probably weighing the gravity of what I was asking. Then he sighed. You know, revenge doesn't always feel as good as you think it will. Save the lecture. I cut in sharply. I know what I'm asking for, Paul. Will you do it? Yeah, he said slowly. I'll do it. But I'm not cheap. Money's not an issue, I replied. Send me your fees, and I'll take care of it. All right, John. I'll get started. I'll dig up everything I can on this Matt Richards guy. But promise me something. When you get what you're looking for, don't let it consume you. Sometimes it's better to just walk away. I bit back the retort that sprang to my lips. Paul meant well, but he didn't understand. This wasn't about moving on. This was about showing Elizabeth that she couldn't just tear apart my life and get away with it. She needed to feel the sting of every wound she'd inflicted on me. Thanks, Paul, I muttered, and ended the call. With that set in motion, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, letting the silence envelop me. Just when I thought I was alone, the doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Who the hell could it be? I got up, making my way to the door, and pulled it open. 2 familiar faces stared back at me. Lisa, Elizabeth's so-called best friend, and someone else, Carol, a woman I recognized from our neighborhood association. They looked upset but determined. What are you 2 doing here? I asked, my brows furrowing. John, we need to talk, Lisa said firmly. We saw the email. I've been spreading the word like you asked, and Carol found out some things about Matt that you need to know. What things? I asked, intrigued despite the weariness gnawing at me. Carol stepped forward, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. Matt isn't who he says he is, she whispered. I know him from a few years back. He's been involved in some really shady dealings, manipulating women, getting them to invest in his ventures, and then disappearing with their money. He's a con artist, John. A dangerous one. My mind spun, piecing together what she was saying. So this was Matt's game? He was using Elizabeth, probably planning to squeeze her dry and then move on to the next victim. Anger flared anew, and I clenched my fists. Do you have proof? I asked, voice taut with tension. Yes, and it's worse than that. Lisa cut in, her eyes wide. He's been investigated for fraud before, but he's slippery. There's a rumor that he's even connected to some criminal networks. We thought you should know before you take things further. I stared at them, my heart pounding. This changed everything. Elizabeth thought she'd found some fairy tale romance, but she was just a pawn in Matt's twisted game. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt a surge of worry. What do you want me to do with this? I asked slowly. We need to stop him, Lisa said, her voice fierce. Not just for you, but for Elizabeth. She's being used, and she doesn't even know it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but She's still our friend, John. She needs to be warned. Warned, I echoed, incredulous. She won't listen. She chose this. Maybe she did, Carol interjected. But if we can show her the truth, it might be enough to pull her out of his web. And if not, we can expose him. Make sure he doesn't do this to anyone else. The fire in Carol's eyes took me by surprise. She'd always been the reserved type, but now I saw the depth of her resolve. She wasn't here just to gossip. She wanted justice. I nodded slowly, ideas forming rapidly in my mind. All right, if we're doing this, we're going all in. Paul, my cousin, is digging up everything on Matt right now. If we can get his criminal record or anything tying him to these scams, we'll have the leverage we need. And what about Elizabeth? Lisa asked softly. I paused, the weight of the question settling over me. Did I still care enough to save her? Or was I too far gone in my anger to bother? She had betrayed me, broken me, but now I had a chance to hurt the one person who dared to take what was mine. I'll deal with her, I said firmly. Once we have everything, I'll make sure she sees the truth, one way or another. The next few hours passed in a blur. Lisa and Carol stayed, helping me sift through every piece of information Paul sent over. It was worse than I'd imagined. Matt had a trail of broken women and shattered lives behind him. He used charm, money, and empty promises to draw them in, then drain them dry before vanishing. There were whispers of blackmail, threats, even a case of a woman who'd been hospitalized after trying to expose him. By the time night fell, I had a complete dossier on him, dates, names, financial records. The noose was tightening, and I was ready to pull. Let's do it, I muttered, sending off the compiled information to every media outlet, every lawyer, every authority figure I could think of. If Elizabeth wanted to be with this man so badly, then she'd go down with him. But there was one last call I needed to make. I dialed Elizabeth's number, my heart pounding furiously. She picked up on the first ring. John, what do you? I know everything, I interrupted, my voice cold as ice. I know who Matt really is. I know what he's been doing. And if you don't get out now, you're going down with him. There was silence on the other end, then a shaky laugh. Are you threatening me, John? No, I whispered, feeling the finality of the moment sink in. I'm warning you. This is your last chance to walk away with anything left of your life. Stay with him, and you'll be dragged into the mud right along with him. You're bluffing? She sneered, but there was fear in her voice now. You wouldn't do that. You. I've already done it, Elizabeth. Check your email. I hung up, breathing hard. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a flurry of texts and missed calls from her. I ignored them all. It was over. The woman I once loved, the life we once had, all of it was gone. And now, as I stood in the dark, my mind clear and my heart heavy, I finally felt something other than rage. Relief. I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the pain. Elizabeth and Matt would face their own consequences now. And as for me, I would rebuild. But this time I would start from scratch without the baggage of the past. The past was gone. The future was mine. And no one would ever take that away from me again.